Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're reviewing Department of Truth. Oh, there we go. Hope you guys are doing well. I thought I'd catch up on this series a little bit. I reviewed the first issue, but have remained subscribed to it with my comic bookstore. So I have the next three issues, number 2, 3, and 4 here. We'll talk a bit about them, but also I'm just going to kind of be talking a little bit about this series and why I'm comfortable naming it the best new series of 2020. I actually already said this earlier on Twitter, but I wanted to make a video about this and why I feel that way, why this one kind of stands out among some of the other indie comics we reviewed over last year, and why I think a lot of people out there would enjoy this one if they haven't checked it out themselves. The books are by James Tynion IV, who's writing and is just fantastic in this, but backed up by Martin Simmons, who's an excellent artist, and Aditya Bidikar, who is the book's letterer. Collectively, they tell this fascinating and amazing story. If you want a better idea of, or like if you want to kind of really get introduced to this series, I do recommend you check out my first review of the first book. That will certainly help matters. But broadly speaking, Department of Truth is about the department that the title, a secret U.S. government organization dedicated to conspiracy theories. Basically, this world that this story takes place in is one where if enough people start believing in something, reality will actually form around that belief. We got to see that in action in a terrifying way in the first issue, where these strange men approach this journalist and take him to the end of the world, which is an actual edge and a wall of ice like those flat earthers believe, because of these internet conspiracy theories spreading around the world. That journalist ultimately goes to join the Department of Truth that is headed by none other than Harvey Oswald. And these subsequent books kind of get into why that is, but basically, that situation kind of represents the department's goals, where people do kind of recognize it as a conspiracy, but there's so many different theories and beliefs, they all sort of cancel each other out. I think it's the mob, some people think human conspiracy. And what I like about all of this is all just true of our world. Obviously, not the belief stuff, but the facts about the JFK assassination are dispute, and everyone kind of believes a different thing. I had someone completely unrelated to this. We weren't talking about this series or anything like that, but he was telling me all about how he believes that Nazis who fled to South America were behind the JFK assassination and all other bunch of other uh, dark things that they've accomplished over the 20th century, basically. And he wasn't saying that to be nutty or anything like that. He was just telling me some stuff that, like some video he watched or something. Yeah, just I don't know how much he believed it himself, but it was just an interesting example of this sort of content in action. In a lot of ways, these books are, of course, about these different, like this department struggle, but in a much deeper way, you can very easily read into these books and about just belief in general and these conspiracy theories, how reality is shaped by our beliefs and how important that is. And that's, I think, the crux of the story. It's not heavy handed, but it's all there and it's a fascinating discussion. So we have really good art that I think is only getting better, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit more later. Interesting writing that works on more than one level, and a very fun series that just on the surface level could like just be enjoyed by anyone as a secret agency working against the truth. You don't have to engage with the deeper meaning thoughts behind these books to enjoy it. So yeah, this is an easy choice for my top series of 2020. Helping that is the fact that the first issue ends with like the best kicker of a new series has done in a long time. That reveal of Lee Harvey Oswald heading up the Department of Truth is saved for that final page of the first issue. This has come out months ago now, so I don't mind spoiling it and talking about it a little bit. But I'm doing so because I think it's really worth talking about that reveal. That was so good and such a neat twist on an already interesting little world that had been built in Department of Truth in that first issue. Well, I guess the real question then became, where does this series go from here? And of course, these next three books give us a pretty good idea of that. But issue number 2 starts off with our journalist friend kind of coming to grips with everything he just learned, and he reunites with his husband, for example, after like disappearing for a week and can't really tell him anything about what he learned. Of course, it's earth shattering because it just changes everything about like what he knows of the world and stuff like that. But it's still very interesting for me. The guy's name is Cole, by the way. I had to check that. But he sits down with his partner, and she's from the first issue as well. She kind of explains like some things as he asks questions. He actually kind of has come to grips with a lot of the stuff we've already talked about in terms of all this conspiracy business and the interesting caveats of all this stuff regarding like conspiracies in the past. So she kind of assumes he'll have questions about like, oh, like JFK and all of that. He actually only has one question about this being that actually is fictional, as far as I can tell. But based on very real events from the 1980s that Cole himself went through as a child, called Starface. And Starface is terrifying. We get introduced to him at the very start of the second issue, and he's like this weird, supernatural kind of like serial killer that makes children eat babies, and he's part of that 1980s satanic panic that happened back then. Basically, Cole had these nightmares, and then it ended up kind of coming out. The various like psychologists and therapists that he's met kind of created these false memories in him, which was this issue in the 1980s as well, and it became this whole thing. So Cole wants to know, well, if conspiracies are real and take form around people's beliefs, and this became this whole local issue that all these people were believing, was Starface real? Harston Logan, Shadowcatcher, thanks for joining me, the both of you. Always good to see either of you guys. So the rest of the issue is kind of about Cole trying to figure this out. He goes to this the record keeping warehouse or whatever of the Department of Truth, and it's all just walls of pages of news clippings and stuff like that held together by string, like that old cliche. And that's how they keep track of everything, because computers can be messed with by this belief system, and they find this is a better way to figure out what's changed over time. And the record keeper wears a tinfoil hat, but he has such a brilliant line about it. They kind of like that. Cole kind of comments about it. He's like, oh yeah, everyone laughs at me and no one bothers to wear these anymore, but there was a time when people believed this stuff, and because of that belief, these things were actually effective at blocking out people's brainwaves. Like he's not just doing it because he's a conspiracy theorist. He's doing it because conspiracy theorists believe that worked, and because of that, it worked. It's so interesting. We haven't even gotten into, by the way, Area 51 or anything like that, but they've kind of danced around it a little bit with this book, but I'm very curious about that. Tom P makes an excellent point. All the cover art really rocks. It's all done by, what's his face, Simmons. Martin Simmons does all the cover art, and it is all very good. Well, maybe he does some of the alternate, but at least he does the core ones, because that's what it says on these books. He's so good. He has a way of telling the surreal stuff. Now, I will say this happens in book 2 and book 3, but not book 4, and that's very significant to me, because it also happened in book 1. There's these pages of dialogue where it spreads out across the 2 pages. I'm going to find it so I can show you guys, because it's going to be hard to just describe it without really seeing it. Uh-oh. Assuming I can find it. Happened very specifically to me, so it should show up somewhere. Oh. Now I'm leading to lots of dead air. This is it. Perfect, here we are. We have a spread page like this. I'm going to try and center the frame so you guys can get a good look at it. So the way this page moves is you go from here to here, and then you go down from here to here. But that's not how I read it. So I did this, down to this, and this down to this. And it's very confusing like that. And the art doesn't really convey that we're moving horizontal. It kind of does, but I wasn't really looking at it properly. And that happened to me in the first 3 issues, all in a row. There's only one instance of it in each issue, but there's these 2 pages and it spreads out in a weird way and it's very odd to read. Book 4, they finally have one of those pages and they actually convey it in a way that your eyes move across the 2 pages. So to me, that indicates Martin Simmons is really kind of finding his voice with this very surreal, vivid art that is often full of like very symbolic stuff like this. And he's able to really bring it to life. So I do appreciate it. Kirsten Logan says, "Hey Arden, will you be watching WandaVision?" See, I've never really cared enough to be subscribed to Disney Plus, but maybe I'll amend that for WandaVision or something like that. Because I also have to catch up on Mandalorian, so I finally have like at least 2 shows to care about on that platform. That's something. But otherwise, I've had no reason to indulge in Disney Plus. Now, the other option is I could always just find a copy of WandaVision, and maybe we'll just talk about that. But I digress. That's a good question, though, and I figured someone would ask me about that. Oh yeah, so issue 3 then. This one gets kind of follows up on some of that, but really it's all about this woman. Oh, it's so sad too. Forgot. Because like all these cool pages that are in issue 3 are all about this lady whose daughter died in a school shooting. And she basically becomes one of the Sandy Hook parents in real life. They don't actually use that good reason, but right-wing conspiracy theorists start to create this whole little elaborate ruse that she's part of. They start harassing her, going after her, and their belief is that she's an actress. She was paid to do this. She never like actually had a kid. That kid just got sent away somewhere, and they're all just planted agents as part of this conspiracy to take away Americans' guns. And slowly but surely, because of this world and the way it works, those beliefs start to take root. The woman's mind starts to form. It's horrifying. So she starts to come to grips with her changes and stuff, and then Cole like has to confront her basically. And the end result is they just kind of go after the source of the information, make the conspiracy like hope that these beliefs, like those right-wing people, will just kind of move on. They steal all the evidence that the woman gathered on herself and knock her out, and they know that she will basically forever be ruined by this. Either she's going to start to believe that this did really happen to her child. I think it's her son, actually. I said daughter, but it's not important. Her child died. And either she's going to live the rest of her life believing that like they really did die, and then people tried to take that away from her, or she's going to believe that it was all a fraud and these agents came in the middle of the night and took away all the evidence. And it just ends on this horrible page of her screaming. But like, look at this insanity. This is the image we're left with. So book 3 is horrifying, but in a good way. Like, it's just a very vivid experience and just solid as a rock. At this point, I was ready to call it for this series, and like it's the best that of anything that new that came out last year that I read. Highly recommended, and issue 4 maintains that without blemishing it whatsoever. It's about these 2 journalists who receive evidence. So if you'll recall, I was talking about at the beginning of this group, this mysterious group of agents came and took hold and showed him that the world is indeed turning flat. And that's how he got introduced to the Department of Truth. They're not actually affiliated with the department. They're the department's enemies. And they're led by that woman who you'll see in some of these covers with the X'd out eyes. She's actually kind of been cookie crumbed in across the last few issues as being behind a lot of the stuff that the Department of Truth has faced so far. Book 3 is a lot more direct about it. And this journalist talks with his editor, and they're being observed by the Department of Truth, actually. We find that out early on. And they've been receiving letters from this mysterious organization. And it paints this picture of JFK being assassinated. Okay, so in the most insane 2 pages of comics I've ever seen, this right here, we are painted this elaborate conspiracy of 12 letters this reporter is sent. First is one that changes Obama's birth location in 1961 from Kenya to Hawaii. So, of course, a conspiracy theory like this would crop up in a series like that. Like it's just like we've talked about the Sandy Hook thing and say the Satanic Panic of the 80s. So this birtherism stuff feels like it's right in line with everything we've talked about so far. But then it keeps going. And I don't know. See, the only way I can convey the emotional like weight of this page is if I read it verbatim, and I don't really want to do that because I should read this book. But then he talks about how like JFK was taken out because he wouldn't cooperate with this conspiracy. Then Obama, Bush, both Bushes, and Clinton, they were all like created, educated from birth to like become part of this new world order on behalf of people. It paints this elaborate conspiracy that taps into stuff like conspiracies surrounding the Bushes and the Clintons, and pulls it all together into this narrative. I don't want to call it coherent narrative because it's not, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to just be wild and all over the place. And let's read some of them. The third letter he gets is a request by this guy named Jules to pull a young teenager named William Jefferson Clinic from the White House trip with his boys in 1963. So like Clinton was approached by this Admiral Jules guy to become part of his new leadership, and Jules, this fictional person as far as I can tell, is behind this vast conspiracy to become to install Obama to create this new world order as some sort of antichrist figure. And the journalist is actually smart enough to recognize that he's being played, that this isn't real, that someone's trying to falsify all this evidence to get him to believe this conspiracy theory that brings together all these other conspiracy theories. And the Department of Truth realizes that they're doing so in order to eventually just expose the Department of Truth itself. They're creating a narrative that will paint the Department of Truth as the architects of the New World Order, even though they're not really. It's pretty clear that they're just desperately trying to keep dangerous conspiracies from taking hold in reality. But these journalists know too much, and Lee Harvey Oswald tells the Cole, like, you kind of screwed up and freaked out over that satanic figure from your past. What was his name? Scary Face, I believe. And like, you're gonna have to prove yourself here. This reporter and this editor from the Washington Post, they're explicitly said to be from there. They know too much now. And for whatever reason, they don't want to bring them into the Department of Truth. I don't know why. They seem like smart journalists who figured out that they were being played. Seem like they would be useful for the journalists, but they're like, nope. The journalists actually know the Department of Truth is watching them, so they leave their room, go next door, and knock on the door. And Lee Harvey Oswald says, you're going to answer the door, you're going to let them in, and you're going to shoot them both in the head, or you're out. Which probably means he's dead too. Like Cole's dead too. So the journalists actually come in and say they all they really want to know is like he says, look, at the end of the day, I agree with you guys. I don't want any of this story to run. I don't want these lies to spread into the world. I don't even want to know who you people are. I just want to know that you guys are the good guys. Cole pulls out his gun, tears running down his face. He says, I think so. And the journalist says, oh. And they both get shot. Him and his editor get shot in the head. And that's the end of the fourth book. So, like I said, I was already sold on issue number 3, but issue number 4 just cements it even further. And if you're sleeping on this series, you're sleeping on a hit. The best hit of 2020, if you ask me. Maybe not like the best series overall. Like, I'd have to compare it to some ongoings. And there's more stiff competition in that regard. But in terms of Department of Truth, it's like as a new series, because we reviewed quite a few this year. Firepower from Kirk. I'm blanking on his first name. but Robert Kirkman, right? Guy who did Walking Dead, which is okay. And we did some other like more fringe stuff. We also did kind of one-off stuff, like that Ed Brubaker book, Pulp, which I really enjoyed. But this was something new entirely. This is like a new type of storytelling, or like a new area to explore in the world of fiction. That the only person I can compare it to that's done this kind of stuff before is Terry Pratchett, an excellent fantasy writer who passed away a few years ago. But I love that dude. I've read all of his books, and he talks a lot, or like his books deal a lot because it's all in a fantasy world, kind of a parody of, I guess we'll say, Lord of the Rings and those kind of worlds. Uh, and that world is also shaped by belief. So a lot of people believe in that world's equivalent of Santa Claus, and that's the only reason why their equivalent of Santa Claus very much actually exists and has tremendous magical power. Their world of belief has real power. So when people believe in gods, they create this powerful god that rules over their world. It's very interesting. And this book, like Department of Truth, broadly seems more interested less in religion, like Terry Pratchett was, and more in conspiracies. But I would love, like we kind of touched on it a little bit with the Satanic Panic stuff. I would love for Tinian to explore the idea of belief in general in this series and maybe broaden out beyond just conspiracies. But there are so many cool conspiracies to talk about. Like I said, Area 51 is just floating around this thing. They bring it up once in a while, but one day we're going to see aliens in this series. I'm just telling you guys right now. And, oh, I'm so excited. Tom P says, that's a cool concept. Comics like this are way ahead of mainstream sci-fi and fantasy stuff. I agree. Especially, less so maybe in books, and like prose and stuff, but in the world of television and movies, they're still like, it feels like they're just kind of catching up to this sort of thing. Because you get stuff like Ex Machina, which kind of will explore some of this. Maybe it's like some other things off the beaten path. That Upgrade movie kind of comes to mind as getting into a little more of the higher tier sci-fi. This screams the need for some company to be with ambition and a budget to adapt this thing. I almost want to say Netflix, but Netflix I feel is a little too cheap for this. Like this thing needs weight to it to really be good, and I would like to see that one day. So maybe Amazon Prime or something, or some other up and coming company wants to get really ambitious. And it's not like it needs an adaptation. It's just that would be cool to see. There's a lot of room to explore. Let's just put it that way. And if not, that's fine too. I am in the tank for this book no matter what. So I don't know how many reviews we're gonna do ongoing of this thing, but you should all just know personally, like, you know, when I do negative reviews and stuff and talk about how it pales in comparison to other books out there, this is a prime example of that. This is where I kind of feel like superhero books sometimes need to amp up the game here and there, because you get cool ideas like this and it's like, well, why can't we get superhero stuff exploring that a little more? We're getting a little more weighty. But not to say that I need everything to be exploring belief and all that. It's just, or you know what, take the big two aside entirely and let's just talk about Image for a second. I would like Image to do more stuff like this, perfectly honest. I realize that they're kind of like, they're creator-owned companies, so they don't really have control, but the creators at Image, a lot of their series feel more generic compared to something more original and strong. Yeah, Tom P says HBO might be able to do it, but this stuff is so current. Things like QAnon. That is the concern, and surprised I'm still monetized, honestly. Like, we talked about some pretty serious stuff, but and we'll see how long that lasts. I'm not trying to cheese YouTube. I looked through their policy, and I feel we're talking about serious topics, but with like a wall of fiction around them. So I don't feel anyone should be too offended by them. Honestly, if you read these books, it's pretty clear where Tinian stands on these things. He's just exploring these ideas. I think that's really worth doing. I would argue if you showed issue number 3 to like the parents of Sandy Hook, I don't think anyone should do this, but if they were to happen to read this, they would probably find it really interesting, vivid, and possibly traumatizing to them, but I don't think they would find it offensive. HBO, though, is probably the best bet, because with the quality of stuff we're getting out of HBO Max, like, they could do it, and they also are probably the ones most willing to be daring, because that's HBO's like core identity, is to push the envelope and do stuff like that. If you look at something like Lovecraft Country, it feels like they would be willing to do something like this, or Watchmen. They're willing to kind of, yeah, like push the envelope, like push boundaries and stuff, the way good art should. And they also are willing to put money behind things in general. Not always, but it's like they can make stuff look good. Let's put it that way. When they have a Game of Thrones level confidence. But so far, HBO Max has been great. I think I've talked about The Flight Attendant already and how much I enjoyed that. It's not very comic booky. It's based on a novel, but Lovecraft Country is great too. Although I still have to get around to watching that season finale because for some reason that's where I stopped. um, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, okay, that's good. We'll leave things there. Tom P says agree completely because I was agreeing with him about HBO, but no, we clearly are identifying why that company stands out. I'm actually glad you mentioned them because I kind of blanked on them there. I wasn't really thinking about HBO Max because it's not a Canadian thing, but there's that would be a good choice and probably the best one out of the current market. Tom P says, "Well, you sold me on this. I'll be checking that book." Well, that's great. I would be shocked if you were disappointed. And what I would recommend if you're looking for a new thing is you guys should just keep an eye out, or like you can pre-order the first trade because that should be coming out soon. And that's a good way to kind of get through this first chunk of book if you want, or read this as the summary and jump on at issue 5. Yeah, it'll probably work. And these books are entertaining in and of themselves individually that I feel I could give someone one of this and be like, don't worry about the rest. Just enjoy the ride. It'll explain itself as it goes along, as it always does. And oh boy, although the best way to enjoy it is to go. I think you'll get the most out of it. Yeah, so we'll leave things there. And thank you for Tom P, Karsten, JF Hay or JF Hayes. Oh, I missed his comments. I'm going to read it right now. I love this comic. It would make for an amazing movie or TV show. Well, that just fits with what I was saying earlier, but I'm glad I then read your comment at some point. And everyone else who joined me. Oh, Shadowcatcher too. Always glad to hang out with you guys for a bit. And tomorrow we're going to revisit the Avengers series, although I kind of regret that. If I had paid more attention to WandaVision, I probably would have just first episode tomorrow. So, but I'm not going to change that now. So maybe we'll just save that for give me a bit more time to watch it and think about it that way, I guess. But yeah, and then after that should be top 10 video. So see you guys later. Hope you enjoy all of that stuff, and hope you all have a great week because it's Sunday and we're just getting started.